Hey guys, welcome back to another video on the channel, and this particular video is very special because we will be discussing one of the most controversial new champions League of Legends has ever introduced lately. SANTE was released just one patch before preseason, and for me personally it didn't really make any sense to even try him in that period, as it will be pointless, but only practice him in preseason and build a picture around his playstyle as well. And if you keep up with all the win rates, you will 100% notice that SANTE is really not in a good spot. His win rate is horrible across the board of elos and doesn't really feel functional as the rest of the other top laners, which give the feel of better functionality in-game. And in my opinion, that's because SANTE is not your typical top laner tank where you're required to only lane good and tank damage and let your team carry. SANTE is in the opposite of that. SANTE is a tank skirmisher hybrid who wants to fight as much as possible and get the most out of his runes, so later on in the game be much stronger. Well, either ways, let's take a look whether he really doesn't function or simply his skill set is much more complicated than your average top laner, which makes him really skill demanding. So let's get to it. Now, for us to talk about his abilities, we need to understand his two phases, and in order to understand that, we need to talk first about his ultimate, All Out. SANTE shatters his Netofos and basically knocks back the enemy, and if the enemy hits a wall, he goes through the wall and then SANTE follows him up. Now, when you ulti an enemy, basically he takes an amount of damage, but if he goes through a wall, he gets a greater amount of damage. That's the first part of the ultimate. As for the second part, SANTE loses a percentage of his maximum health, bonus armor, and bonus magic resist, and in return gains attack damage, omnivamp, and transforms his abilities. This is the most important part you have to understand about his ultimate, and all of this actually scales with how much armor and magic resist he has. So this is very important in order to understand how he can transform from a tank into a skirmisher. Now, let's talk about his passive, Dauntless Instinct. SANTE damaging abilities mark enemies hit for a short duration. Attacking a marked enemy, consume the mark to deal damage plus maximum health physical damage. During All Out, attacking a marked enemy instead deals physical damage and additional max health true damage. As for his Q, Intofo Strikes. SANTE slams his weapon, dealing physical damage in a small area around him and briefly slowing targets' hit. If an enemy is hit, SANTE gains a stack for a short duration, and at 2 stacks, SANTE instead fires a shockwave that pulls enemies. During his All Out, this ability's cooldown is reduced significantly and no longer slows targets' hit. As for his W, Pathmaker, when he begins charging, SANTE raises his weapon defensively for a short duration, becoming unstoppable and reducing incoming damage. When he releases, SANTE ramps forward, dealing a percentage of maximum health physical damage, knocking back and stunning enemies he passes through for a short duration based on charge time. During All Out, this ability's cooldown is refreshed and the damage reduction is increased. It deals an additional amount of physical damage based on charge time, and the charge and dash speed are doubled. E. Footwork. SANTE dashes, gaining a shield for a short duration, and if dashing to an ally, the distance is significantly increased and they are also shielded. Other spells can be cast during this ability. During All Out, this ability's dash speed is increased. Dashing to a targeted location has increased range and can go over the walls. Now let's talk about his runes, then later on talk about his itemization. Overall, when we think about SANTE's runes, we want to enhance his stats when he's in his normal form and let him scale, and also make him able to survive and shred enemies in All Out. So for that, we have to give him a boost of shielding and in the same time damage. We need to adjust his runes to fit that profile. And what better tree than Resolve Tree? In the Resolve Tree, we want to take Grasp of the Undying, followed by Demolish, followed by conditioning, which will grant us the armor and magic resist, which will be converted into damage during all out. And we want to take Overgrowth as the last branch to completely complement our Grasp of the Undying, giving us maximum health gain possible for early skirmishes and laning phase, which will be converted later into a shield increase. As for the secondary tree, we want to take Triumph for survival, and Last Stand to enhance our damage when we instantly lose HP by hitting all out. As for his itemization, we want to make sure that we build the core correctly, then we will have 4 options to choose from, and it basically depends on how the match goes. So our core basically is Iceborne Gauntlet, followed by the Plated Steel Caps, into Sunfire Aegis. From there depends on the matchup. For example, if I see that the enemy AD carry is already getting ahead and the enemy jungler is someone like Kindred, 100% I want to get something like Randuin Omen, but overall these are like specific cases. Overall we have 4 items that I would personally prefer, and that would be Thornmail, Gargoyle Stoneplate, Force of Nature, and Frozen Heart. Now let's talk about his gameplay. And in my opinion, the core reason why people tend to call him weak and useless is mainly because K'Sante's worst enemy is bad positioning and agile top laners. To explain that, we must first understand and appreciate the fact that getting a kill on an enemy top laner in the early game is extremely rare, and needs some mistakes done from the enemy's side. After all, early on you haven't yet procced your runes, and you lack the damage to one-shot someone even at his 30% HP. But mainly you want to skirmish with him and apply pressure when possible, and not to be too reckless early on. But all of that changes once you start building items and getting level 6, where we can say confidently that you can, with good positioning, go for a kill. See, his kit, and specifically his E, is designed for you to reach your allies more than to dash around enemies. And your R is not a random ability to be used without care. You mainly want to use this when an enemy has either a CC ability or a dash ability down. That gives you an extreme leverage over them. And also, by the time their ability is up, you want to be saving the W for that purpose, whether to chase or simply dash while being unstoppable to avoid the full effect of the stun. And I also believe he shines the most in teamfights, where enemies tend to misposition and stick to a wall. He can easily remove an enemy carry or an annoying tank fully from the fight, and best case scenario, in when you are ahead and someone comes for the aid of that carry, you basically end up dragging 2 people out of the fight, making it a 4 versus 3 for your team. Pretty cool, right? As for the part about his matchups, K'Sante is a great blind pick, but he really falls apart against agile champions. Champions that can constantly create distance and hit and run. And in that term, I mean champions like Riven or Fiora or even Vayne Top. Such champions can be a huge pain in the neck, but across the board, K'Sante is a great blind pick and a great first pick to build a team around. Well, I wish you guys enjoyed this video and now have a better understanding of the champion, so be sure to smash that like button and hit subscribe to stay tuned for more upcoming videos. Whitebeard out.